We now move over to the Middle East, where Israel has agreed to allow a limited amount of aid into Gaza, ending a complete blockade that's been in place since March the 2nd. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says a basic amount of food will be permitted to enter, aimed at preventing a full-scale hunger crisis in the Strip. The move comes amid growing international pressure, with France urging the immediate, massive and unhampered flow of aid into the enclave. The announcement also coincides with Israel's military escalating its campaign, launching what it calls a large-scale ground offensive. At least 151 Palestinians were killed on Sunday. Israel says it will work to prevent Hamas from taking hold of the aid, even as indirect talks continue on a possible halt to the fighting. We're now joined by Jim Rice, who's an international law professor. He joins us from Vigan in the Philippines. Jim, thank you very much for joining us. How significant is this decision of them ending this blockade that's been in place since March, over 2 months? A lot of international pressure. Is this just for optics, do you think?
Well, thanks for having me on, Thomas. No, as you mentioned, I think that this is obviously a good sign. I would argue that the aid should be unlimited and not just limited amounts of aid. And to try and answer your question, I believe this is as the result of a massive amount of disapproval of people and nations and organizations all around the world. And as we know, this is in violation of the principles of international humanitarian law. And so all I can say is I'm pleased, but I'd like to see an end to the fighting now, and I'd like to see Hamas return all of the hostages.
Jim, we've all seen the horrific photos coming out of the Gaza Strip. This allowance of aid into the Gaza Strip has obviously been welcomed, but has also said, some countries have said that it is not enough. Israel said it will be the basic amount. Is this enough to prevent a wider humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
Well, I mean, what you just mentioned kind of says it all. I mean, what is the basic amount of food? I mean, it's a tiny amount of food, just enough to survive. I mean, using food as a weapon, using food as a tool of leverage is morally and legally wrong. And food must never be used as a weapon of war.
Jim, we have seen growing international pressure. We've seen the likes of French President Emmanuel Macron and Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez come out and actually condemn some of Israel's actions. Do you think the developed world is starting to speak out against some of Israel's actions? And how much of this shift do you think was driven by international pressure?
Well, in addition to French president and Spain, I noticed that Pope Leo, who has recently been inaugurated in Rome, is also calling for an end of the fighting and for humanitarian aid to be allowed into Gaza. So I believe that the overwhelming number of nations and peoples around the world are calling for this urgently.
And Jim, how do you interpret the timing of this? This obviously coincides with the fact that Israel are launching a new ground offensive today, Operation Gideon's Chariots, which is just the start. We've seen an escalating in the airstrikes, in the fighting over the past 3 days, where over 300 people have been killed in the Gaza Strip. Do you think this has been purposely timed to grab the headlines?
Perhaps. It's hard to say what the motives are, but as a practical matter, I can't really see how you can have a major military ground operation being launched and at the same time providing massive amounts of urgently needed food aid. So honestly, I don't know what's going to happen, but it doesn't bode well for the aid initiative.
Jim, this war is something at the front of a lot of people's minds. Looking at the big scope of the war at the moment, obviously the blockade was a huge thing that was garnering a lot of attention, but also, of course, the statistics constantly coming out of the Gaza Strip of the amount of people that are dying. Looking at the broader scope of the war, what's your analysis? Do you think that we can see this peace deal being signed anytime soon? It was obviously fighting was presumed once again in March, but looking at the broader scope, what are your thoughts on the state of this conflict at the moment?
There are so many difficult things to consider here. As I mentioned earlier, I believe that Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu really doesn't have a motive to end the conflict. And the reason for that is because once the conflict is over, or there's a durable ceasefire and peace, his own domestic politics will likely oust him from office. So that's one thing. The other issue that is probably pushing Israel to act is the recent visit by Trump to the Middle East, and specifically to Qatar. And it has been suggested that Qatar is urging Trump, or has urged Trump, to try and put pressure on Netanyahu, who by the way, Trump did not visit in this latest international trip.
Jim Rice, thank you very much. You are staying with us. We now move over to Europe, where on May the 18th,